Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art2Life podcast. I'm back from a 4 or 5 day backpack trip with my daughters in Colorado. Man, it was so great. Mostly because there was no cell service, but I just turned everything off and spent most of my time walking and hiking and talking, and it was just so great. You know, we all know this. It's so good to take a break, but man, when you don't for a while, you kind of forget that you need to. And then, you know, I had planned this trip a long time ago. It came at a really busy time for me, but I went anyway. My older daughter, Lila, lives in Brooklyn. Lila's 29, Hannah is 27. Hannah lives on the West Coast. So anyway, we flew to Colorado, kind of right in between, and we did this backpack trip in the Maroon Bells wilderness area. But it was just so beautiful and such a great break. And while I was walking around and just thinking, it's a great process. There's an editing that goes on when you're out there in nature, and at least for me. And I was just thinking, well, what are the important things? You know, like what are the most important things I want to share right now? And they're the things often that I share with you that I'm needing. This has always been what I've been doing. I've been figuring this out for myself and just sharing the process of finding my way. And it turns out that's helpful. And I hear from so many of you. And by the way, thank you so much for leaving all those great comments and thoughts on the SpeakPipe, the little utility. If you go to art2life.com under podcasts, there's a little yellow tab and you can record a message. And I just want you to know that I listen to all those. I can't reply to all of them, but it's really great. So thanks for that, for those comments. So I know that sometimes there's things we hear and they just come at the right time. And it's gratifying to hear the things that I'm struggling with or the things that I'm realizing land for other people. So I thought for this episode, I've been thinking about it for 4 days. I wanted to record some of the 5 or 6 or 7 of the most important things, the strategies, some ideas that might be resonant and might impact you guys. So I want to dive into that. And these were I wrote little notes each at the end of the day, and just I thought about this a lot. So these are kind of what are up for me, and I think they're pretty powerful. They're also understandably some of the core values, some of the basic key ideas at Art2Life. It's what we teach, which obviously is that's because they're important, and I think they're powerful. So number one always is this idea that everyone is talented, that everyone is an artist. If you're listening to this and you're curious and you're wanting to bring more creativity in your life, you're in the right place. And it's really at the core of what I teach. I think there's the benefit of this idea, because this is true. This is something I've spent my whole life pretty much since I was an adult, teaching and working with people. I've always taught art and creativity, and I've never found anybody who couldn't do this. It was more the approach, right? The approach, or the way you introduce creativity to people makes it possible. But there's so many limiting beliefs around this that, my sister's talented and I'm not, or whatever, all of that stuff. And it's like, I wish I could just turn that off. If you have any shred of doubt that you can't do this, if art is not available to you, it's just such a waste of time. You do not have to even worry about that anymore. I don't have the time, I could spend a whole several hours going into this. And I do this in our programs, to really rid people of these limiting beliefs. But this thing of talent isn't relevant. I know that's radical, but I've lived this. So this is what I believe, and what I've seen. And I can prove it. What it is and why this is so great is that there's a humility that we as artists, if you understand that everyone has this capacity, I think the benefit for the folks that already know they're artistic and all of that is that there's a humility about it. You're not particularly special. I mean, everyone's special, and creativity allows us to see that in others. And we're all special. We're all amazing. And it comes out differently for everyone. What brings you alive is the clue into where you want to go and what you want to express, and feeling juiced and energized often results in doing more in that area and becoming more creative. It's a natural reaction to feeling really fired up. I have done a lot of long distance running, and I have training partners for different events. And about 10 years ago, I trained for a super long ultra event, and I spent a lot of time with a friend of mine, this guy, Ken. And he was an acquaintance, but it was because he was doing this race. And we had like 8 months to train, and he was the only one I had who was doing this. We were on the same schedule. And so we spent an inordinate amount of time together. And he wasn't somebody, he was in finance and, I would say, generally more conservative than me. We were just so totally different, but we both loved to run. And it's better to have somebody along for these hours and hours you're out in the wilderness running than nobody. But we had kids, and it was really interesting what he was going through at the time. He had a daughter, and he was incredibly frustrated with her. And I learned the whole thing because I had hours to spend with him, and he would, he was constantly punishing her and trying to get her to do academics. She was not a very good student, just wasn't inspired. And, and I was trying to help him, like, well, maybe, there's tutors, and she's particularly bad at English, and this was something, and math, and economics, all the things. And he sort of, this is what he did. And it was particularly bothersome to him that, his daughter wasn't going to get into college because she was, doing so poorly in the business parts of these things. And it was always just a challenge. It was always such a challenge for him. And he just kept piling on the punishments to the point where she couldn't really even go out. She kept losing privileges. And, it was just this and I didn't really have that problem so much with my kids. And I explained to him, there's something like, not every kid is going to be interested in math. I mean, I wasn't. You should have seen my math books from my high school. I drew all over them. I mean, I was the kid in the class who I just was drawing while the teacher was talking about geometry. Well, I like geometry, but, algebra in particular was just a huge sketchbook for me. So, but it was about, it was several months into these runs with this guy, with Ken, who I became incredibly good friends with. So, if he was listening to this, I mean, he became a brother to me because we had this incredible event that we did together, and it was amazing. But I found out that one of the things he was taking away was drama, that his daughter, the thing she wanted to do all the time, it turned out, which he never even mentioned to me, was drama. She loved acting. And he's just like, we're not going to pay for this added curriculum at the school. You had to pay more for this special drama program she was in, and she loved it. And he was cutting it out because she wasn't academically doing these things. And it was just so ridiculous to me, and he wouldn't go, he was shutting it down. I was like, dude, the only thing, you just need to go and show up and be there and give her more of this. The fact that's the key to your daughter. There it is. There's something. It doesn't matter what the thing is. The important thing is that she's found something that brings her alive. And everything else is connected to that. Everything comes from that, and it was like, what I was explaining to him was like Greek. He just didn't, and I connected it, and I explained how this is how art creativity works. She will find her way as long as somebody can find something that brings them alive, especially a young person. My father taught me this. I never had any pressure to be anything. And it was such a gift. He was very creative and he was an artist, but he had an advertising agency and I was a terrible student. I just, only things that I did well in were English and art, of course. And, once in a while, I'd like geometry, but I was in a very, prestigious high school and but I was a train wreck. But I never felt pressure to excel in things I wasn't interested in. It was kind of odd, but the things that I was interested in, I did really well in. And I remember both my parents said, my dad in particular, that he would be disappointed in me. He goes, I don't care so much about grades, but I'd be really disappointed in you, Nick. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. I'm 14 years old. I'm going to have to go into advertising or something. He goes, if you don't try a million things and find what you love. That is probably the single best piece of parenting advice that that I could give anybody. That this expectation that you can, this responsibility, this pressure to lay at the foot of your children, to say, go try all the things, and find some things that just light you up. Like, that is so liberating, because then your child can find their way and they can start choosing and start looking. And this is what brings out the gifts in people, but it's different for everyone. Right? It might be painting that is your thing, or you might end up gardening, or you might be cooking, or you might, whatever it is you want to make, whether it's, a business or any of these things, it has to have juice and it has to have energy. And in this way, everyone has this capacity. And it's from this juice, from this spark that allows us to make things, that allows us to appear talented. It's a superpower. It's a juice. It's an energy. It's a fire that we need to cultivate in ourselves, and we got to teach it to our kids, right? This is how we get there. From the outside, we see someone who's incredibly talented. Oh my God, they're so amazing. But that's because they're on it and they've been chasing it, and there's time involved and there's energy, and you keep going. It's sustainable because you friggin' love it so much. So everyone is talented. Everyone is an artist. This is what I teach. This is the foundation of Art2Life. It's really my life's work to get this message out there. I think it is so, so important, because your life ultimately is the most important thing you're making. Like, yeah, we're going to make some paintings along the way, but it's your life. Like, what else are we doing here? Like, let's make this thing amazing. So the second idea here that I was thinking a lot about was around community. And that, I used to spend a lot of time making art, and I was in school and I loved it because we could get critiques and everything. And then I left school and I went into a period where I was just working really hard by myself, and it wasn't so great. And I really struggled because I just didn't have people to show my work to. And anyway, long story short, Art2Life kind of came out of that, and wanting to be in community, making things and sharing this, and to really get it, you guys, like, we can't know ourselves without the reflection of ourselves through others. And it's like, that's really, really critical. That's so important. And it's not that we need to copy people or we need to have our ego lifted. I'm not talking about that, right? You make things on your own and in your studio and everything, but it's so great to have a check and balance, right? We have all the demons inside of us. We have a sense of who we are, but we learn it from how we're reflected back. It's so important. It's so valuable. We all need to be seen, to be felt, and to be heard. So when that happens, I mean, think of your birthday, think of those times, those points in your life that have felt the most engaging, where you felt the most connected to yourself. It's usually when you're being toasted at your birthday, when people are showing up and reflecting back to you. Think of the way you felt the most connected to yourself is usually in relationship to someone else who really, really sees you. It's so critical. I remember, and it gives you momentum, especially in art. I've taught these destination workshops for years and years and years, and I didn't have time to, so I'm not going to name her because I didn't have time this morning to ask. I don't want to give her name out, but so I will she's unnamed, but it was about 15 years ago. And she came to a workshop, and she was, in the introduction, she was saying, that she's just so damn sick of her kids. This is a break. She's makes art with her kids. And she just thought it's the only kind of like break and enjoyment I've been getting. My marriage is a problem. My kids don't get along. And, but she was taking a break and came to the workshop. It was in Esalen in Big Sur, California, 7-day workshop. And so she introduced this whole thing that this was she's just here. She's not an artist, which is many people sort of say that. I just want to do something for my life. And this feels good. I make these things with my kids. And she came up to me at the break, and she brought these, she felt like an imposter. She really didn't feel like she belonged. And she brought these pictures. She showed me what she'd been making. And these were things she was making at the kitchen table with her kids. And they were really trippy, like snails, and they had this big snail one, and they were like creatures, but kind of, they all had this interesting kind of feeling, like playful, but wacky and really interesting. Like I knew as soon as I saw these that, her point of view and who she was, just in these kitchen table pictures she was making with gouache, with watercolor and felt pens with her kids, these fantastical kind of worlds she was making. And I looked at these and I just thought, these are incredible. And she's like, what are you talking about? I made these with my kid. Like, this is a joke. Like, I don't even know how to draw. And I was saying that this is, it's your point of view. And this is so unique. These are so cool. What you've made here, they're so different. I've never seen anything like this. Like this is you here, and it's so valid, and it is so interesting. And it really was. They were just fantastic. Just the trippiest things. And it took some explaining, and I really had to hammer this home to her. But she stayed. She was going to leave the workshop, but she stayed, and she kept going on the strength of me seeing her for who she truly was. And not only that, she kept going with this art. Today, she's got galleries. She's full on. She just completely embraced art. And I remember so clearly, like, I think I've got to leave. She was crying. She was going to leave. And I know that many other mentors helped her and all kinds of things, but I know that moment was so critical for her to be seen for who she truly was. And it makes everything possible. You can go faster and farther when you have the reflection of others. I was away for 5 days, 6 days. And when you're away from your art making, as you guys know, you feel a little disconnected from it. And I was like, oh my God, I got to do this podcast episode. And what am I even doing here? And, but I listened to the messages people leave, which I do sometimes. I miss it for a week or two, but then I listen to all of them. And it was just the most energizing thing for me to hear people say, oh my God, Nick, what you said in that episode about self-confidence, like the timing was perfect and it really helped me. Thank you. Or whatever the things are that we're in the world and people there's a call and response. And it just energized me, got me so excited and so fired up. So I use this. I think that's why Art2Life came into existence. It was my personal need to be connected. But man, it is so valuable. This reflection of others, in order to see ourselves is so important. The third one is around thinking about making art and making art and how different those two things are, right? So when we think about making art, usually there's some pressure there. We think about the fact we haven't been making our art, or I should be doing this, or I haven't been in the studio and I'm not going again today, and then and that is stressful. And that starts to kind of build, challenges around the whole thing about art. And so what happens is, this has happened to me, and I work with a lot of people to help them come out of this, is that they stop. They just stop, because the whole thing, it's like, who wants that in their life? This is supposed to be fun, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that isn't art. The thinking about it, the worrying about it, even the accolades, that isn't art. Even when you're selling art, isn't art. Art making actually is as soon as you're making, as soon as you put that paintbrush down, as soon as you start looking at the colors and what's happening, the doing of it is the thing you want to judge. And rarely is the doing of it stressful. Like, okay, yeah, sometimes you fall in love too early on your work and you're nervous, but it is nowhere near as stressful as this thinking about it. So if you're thinking about your work and you're, organizing your thoughts around your art, and a big chunk of it feels not so good, really separate it. Really separate those two concepts. One is worry and trying to be planning and all that. And we do that. We can talk about how to get rid of that on another day, but that isn't good. You know how that feels. But the art thing is the friggin' vacation. The art is a vacation from all of the other things in your life. You get to be totally free when you are making art. So this strategy really reduces stress. I've gotten a habit now. I used to stress about what I was doing, whether my work was going to be good enough, whether I could make the painting I was working on now as good as the one that the gallery sold 3 weeks ago. And I just stopped that. I've got a rule. I don't think about it now unless I'm doing it. I don't even look at what I'm doing. I go in the studio, I get everything ready, I turn on the music, I put the headphones on, and then I get my paints ready. I'm not thinking about it. Then I look up and I start, and I use a watch, and then I just look at the work, and that's it. And then I'm making the work, and that's it. And that's actually really enjoyable. And it allows me to kind of keep going, and I feel much more at ease with it all. It is so applicable to everything else. I was on this trip, the first day of this trip, we're up in the mountains, and, we backpacked in, and we're at this really cool lake, and freezing cold, by the way. And I'm in my tent. It's just an amazing experience. You could see the stars out there, and it was really cold, and just the air and the whole thing, and feeling tired from hiking all day. And it was so quiet and so still, so beautiful. And I was so worried about all the things that had to have happened that I had to leave behind, and I couldn't sleep. I mean, it was ridiculous. But it's dropping into the present of where I was and what I was doing. Eventually it kind of comes in, and I just let go of all that stuff. But it's so fine to be working on the things that you're worried about. That's easy, but it's just another thing. It just robs you of your experience of the present when you're just stressing about what's coming. This understanding about making things, creating things, doing things in your life, it's pretty easy and pretty fun. But strategizing, trying to fit it all in, worrying if you did it right or not, like that's separate. And you want to minimize that part. Be more in the making part. Focus on that. How did that feel? Look what you actually did and celebrate that. The fourth idea that this really helps me a lot, and I hope this can work for you too. It's very simple. Most of these things are simplifications, by the way. And it has to do with this whole making art and the reaction of other people and everything, that the win in creativity and the thing you're making is in the making of it. If you really start, it's sort of like wine, like you can just guzzle it or you can really smell it. You can taste it. Small sip, right? Cleanse the palate, like really drop into it. And if you can focus on this making part, what the experience is, how you're feeling, what you're learning, what's happening with those colors, all the nuances of it, all the richness of it, how you're feeling when you were able to let go of control, when you tightened up, when parts you love, parts you don't. And the sequence of that, like it's not just one picture or one piece of art. It's a series of work. As you're doing this over time, what is your practice teaching you? What are you learning? All of those things. That's and how it makes you feel, as opposed to the result. And I know we all want a good result, and I'm the same way, but thinking about outcomes all the time really robs us of the most important part, which is the learning, which is the thing, how you're feeling, how you can just so drop in and be so present to your life, to your art, because you're not thinking about all the rest of the world, all the rest of the things. I mean, this is what art making does. When you're making art, when you're actually doing it, it brings you into presence. That's why it's so contagious. And that's why when we do these workshops, I can't believe people will sit there. I mean, the things, it's a 4-hour session, 3-hour session. People stay for 8. It is so delicious to drop in to the present. When we do an art show, for example, like I've had a sellout show. I've actually done that. I've sold all the work before the show even opened. It's like the biggest fantasy of a miracle. Like, oh my God, when that happened, when I believed that happened, when I saw that was possible, when I imagined if that could ever happen to me, and it has, I thought that that would be it. That's the dream, right? You make all this work and everyone loves it and it sells out. What was that going to mean for the future? As happier than I'd ever been. But the problem came about the next show, because that's really hard to follow. I'm not going to it's probably not going to happen again. And I better make it the work now. The period after that show was probably the worst time for about 6 months I had making my art. I felt so tight. I wasn't happy. I didn't want to change. I was so preoccupied with what other people thought of my work. And then I've had shows where I actually, nobody came to the opening. I mean, not even, they didn't sell anything. Nobody came. And it's just me and the gallery owner. And it was Gallatin River Gallery in Big Sky, Montana, many years ago. But it was such a good experience. I mean, awful. It was a storm and I flew out there. It was so embarrassing, And so I didn't, that was a disaster. But it took another 6 months of trying to work after that, try that. That was the worst. But neither of them made were not helpful. The super positive thing that happened, everyone reacts, loves your work. That was sucked. That just made it so awful for me to make my work. And when no one liked my work or nobody came, that was the worst because I didn't think that I had any value, so I just didn't actually have any, bearing on this, right? So here's the simple idea: the great thing that happens, the amazing outcomes, they're wonderful, and you should celebrate them. And then the horrible things that happen, right? Like, don't pick those up either. Like the really amazing things, great. Okay, you can pat yourself on the back, but don't focus on it. It's not that important. It's not that helpful. What's helpful is double downing on the experience of doing this, the ability, the joy of actually making something, and how you're learning and how you're growing. And it really, like, if you can get into that, it's not as flashy, but God, it sustains you. And it really, truly is the joy. The longer I've been making art, the more I've learned to just love it, that I get to go to a studio and have freedom and just start like continuing this really cool practice. It's the practice you're involved in that is so meaningful. That's what you're making. It's a process. Art making is a process of becoming yourself. And that's what you're making. It's not the art. It's you. You're making you. You're figuring you out. And you're getting more sensitive. You're getting more alive. You're getting more present. People can feel it. Your relationships get deeper. And yeah, there's some evidence of it. There's those cool pieces of art that are behind you that people are going through and saying this one's great or this one's not, or someone wants that or someone doesn't. That's all really good. We all need to have those kind of like wins. But the hard things, the negative things that occur are by far, and I'm not saying they're better, but I might be saying they're better. They're the ones that are really going to teach you something. Those are the ones that are going to have you course correct. They're the ones that are going to have you deeply wonder if what you are doing, they're going to test you in a way. Usually the learning is happening faster. They're more powerful lessons when the feeling is challenging, when it's difficult. So that's the sort of silver lining to the hard ones. I'm walking with my daughters on this trip, and, I asked them how they think about creativity, right? Like how do they feel pressure? I mean, they grew up with, but my ex-wife and I were both artists, and, creativity was just all over our house, and they're in the workforce now. They're doing cool things, and Lila, my older daughter, works in the New York Times, and Hannah's working with this amazing organization called Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And they're a nonprofit that deal with climate change and water issues. It's an amazing organization, but both of them are in the workforce, and they don't at this age they don't get to just do what they want. They're still navigating, as we all do for our whole lives, working for somebody or different, organizations, and there's constraints and all this. And I was saying, is it hard? Like you're both so creative. How do you keep that going? I mean, you're not, and Hannah had it was really interesting. She was saying, well, for me, creativity is how I think about everything. And she used the word beauty, that things that she touches, it doesn't matter whether it's a relationship. It doesn't matter whether it's, the way she decorates her apartment that's way too expensive and she can't afford to decorate it, but she finds things and borrows things, and everything's about this curation, that the way she sets her table, the way she prepares food, the way she manages, she's so relational. Both of them are, that there's this attempt at making things beautiful, that there's a consciousness, she used that word, an artful way to live. And that's how they kind of, both of them shared this, that's the way, a way to sort of manage, like you curate everything you can. because at their age, and it's hard because there's a lot of things you have to do when you're financially constrained and you're trying to, move forward in your life and renting apartments and all the things. And I just thought that was, so relevant to this idea of around, how we make things, how we focus, how we can feel embodied, because our fingerprints are on everything we do. And it's really what I teach. I mean, it was so interesting to hear how they use this, and they've developed this on their own, but it's really hopeful. And I think in a way, it's an approach to living, where it's the way you do things, not so much the fact that, okay, you don't own your apartment and the apartment, it's one of those apartments that you can't afford. So the one, maybe the color's not so great, or you can't afford to live in the best part of town and it's not even your house and the landlord's bugging you, all the things that are challenges, but you can still take that and make it into something so personal, so amazing. And they're both really skilled at this. So it was just wonderful to hear them talk about this idea. I always think of Picasso, those photographs when, from his studio in Spain I think of him standing there. He's got plates and pots and sculptures, and it's just this rich room. He's just standing in this incredible room in sandals and shorts. And that's like, the possibilities are endless, and I just love, that's how I kind of think about it. It's like, that's what it can look like. That's what it can feel like, this artful life. It's really, it's just about focusing on the making, right? That's the way into this. So this fifth one, and I wrote it in my notes here: the higher you climb, the better you can see the way to the top. And this is what the art practice does for us. And again, it's about getting in motion, right? You can worry and worry. You can't figure anything out unless you're doing this thing. So you shift over to be making things. And when you're starting to make something, whether it's a painting or a business or even a relationship or a story or a garden, whatever the things are, when you begin it, there's a certain agency that occurs. There's a certain potency that happens that allows you to make better decisions the further you go, because you have more information. And you cannot imagine what's going to happen to give you the better insight unless you begin. We don't want to begin because we don't know and we're uncertain. And that's why we procrastinate. That's why we don't make our art. That's why I talked about a few minutes ago that awful feeling of not making art is not art. That's just worry and anxiety and fear of uncertainty. We are hardwired to want to know how something's going to come out. This is for pretty much all of us. It's hard to sit in uncertainty. But the benefit of being able to do this is where all the juice is. This is what the wonder and the curiosity and just the amazing things that can occur, the unexpected, come out of this darkness that sort of emerge, that we get to surprise ourselves. It's all the things that we plan. We can't plan. You can never plan the incredible things that happen to us, right? So we get in motion and we get going and we start to understand and get a sense of where we're going and how cool it is because of what we've experienced. We're better able to make decisions about where we're going because of where we've been. And I think I love running for this reason. And this backpack trip was so great because you're looking at this map and you're like, I think we're here. And then there's this big question mark about this big pass coming and, what it's going to be like and how far away, how long it's going to take, how long we've gone, when should we eat lunch? And, but you can't really totally know, but we know a lot more than we did the day before, how hard this is going to be, what it's going to be like, and all of that, even the weather, because we're in it now. All you can do is kind of continue And there's every day, this trip is called the Four Pass Loop, in the Maroon Wilderness in Colorado. And every day you go over a pass. So every day you're climbing to 12, 13,000 feet, and it's pretty hard. The last mile is really, really hard. And, but you really start getting more and more clear. And then finally you can see the last quarter mile or last half mile. Like that's where we're going over those mountains. And it's like, oh my God. And it's super steep. And, we're going up these passes really hard, and you get to the top, and then you can look back and you can see all where you did, what you spent the whole morning, all this walking. It's so clear. And you get this moment when you can look out about where you're going for the rest of the day, and you can really see it more clearly because you have this higher vantage point. And, there's this sense of accomplishment. Getting clarity is this transcendent moment. This is what's so satisfying about when we're making art, that it's unknown. And then you get these glimpses, these breakthroughs. This is what a breakthrough is. A breakthrough is just like getting on top of a mountain pass. It's like, for a second, you have clarity. You have hopefulness. Oh my God, look what I've done. Now I'm getting a sense of where we're going. That's what a breakthrough happens. And you can't really plan it. They come, but it's like, oh my God, now I get it. All these months I've been trying to do this thing with the color, but what I'm really after is this, or this is a new way I can bring these forms together. Or, my art, it's wants to be a little more abstract because this part has given me that idea. I get it. So these passes were like that, and people gather on the passes because they all are feeling pretty exhilarated, and you stop up there and you look at it. It feels so good to have gained some clarity by working and putting an effort there, and you have a meal and you sit up there and you look out there. It gives you hopeful. You're hopeful. It gives you confidence. It's a transcendent moment. It's so interesting. The parallel is just so great. So a couple things that, maybe that relate more to teaching. As we're walking up these passes, which by the way are like really long and hard and arduous, people would be coming down and they would always say a thing. And there's people that, like, this is a tip more for like helping people, and I'm like a teacher, and I'm always trying to come up with ways to help people do things. And there's certain things you can say. And this, hiking up these passes are really hard, and you're going so slow. Then people will be coming down, and for them, it's easy. They've already done the work. They're just like walking, like they're running practically, and they'll say something. And some people will say, oh my God, you're almost there. It's so amazing at the top. And there's certain things that people say that allow you, that make you feel like this is possible for you, right? This is the whole point of this episode. I'm trying to share with you things that are going to make this more possible. And then other people would say, it gets steeper. Like if you think this is hard, it gets worse. And it was so funny to every day, you'd experience these people that would they'd either lift you or drop you down. So having some awareness of just, making things possible for other people is just kind of a good reminder. It was for me. I just thought that was really funny. The other piece of this that I want to share with you around this, making progress and challenging, going after something and accomplishing something. We did this backpack trip, and my daughter, Hannah, who lives in California, she had just come back from Alaska, and she does a lot of backpacking, camping, and hiking. She's pretty outdoorsy. But Lila lives in Brooklyn, and she works for the New York Times. And, we're going on this backpack trip, and we're going to be hiking at elevation. And at some point, she sort of said, I'm worried. She capitalized it because I'm going to be left behind. And, she went and got some boots, and she's walking around Manhattan trying to get in shape for it and break them in, but it's flat there and it's at sea level. So she comes, and we're all, by the way, the altitude thing just knocks. Everyone was tired. I mean, you're out of breath. It's super hard, but she was really worried and felt it especially hard. But what we did is we just went slow. You just slow down. And it was so fine. And you just take lots of breaks. And that's how we kind of did this. And this is a great metaphor. This is a great lesson as well, that the rate at which you do things, especially if they're big things, especially if you haven't done them before, is to do small steps. Little steps often, small bites, small chunks, we did this whole trip. She got one blister. It was so fun. It was so great. And we did 40 miles or whatever. And it was so different than her normal day for all of us, but especially Lila, being, in Brooklyn where you're just kind of walking around the town and it's all flat. So I thought that was, this idea that in life, this lesson that we're learning from art, it's about pace. And you just need to change that it's changing the pace. That's what makes it easier or harder. And you can accomplish anything by adjusting the pace. The sixth idea here that isn't talked a lot about, and I'm talking about it more and more and more. I think it's super, super important. And it's this idea that our art making involves three things. It involves our mind, it involves our body, and it involves our soul. And it's really fascinating when you think about, I kind of need all these. And it's a checklist, right? Like sometimes we make things and it's like, we just don't feel that there's no gravitas to it. Or maybe it just doesn't have a lot of, doesn't resonate with us. And you can kind of check against does it have sort of deep feeling in it? Do I want to have that in there? Or it feels too constrained. I'm just so in my head when I'm making this art. I know you know what I'm talking about when I say I'm so much in my head, The mind, planning and thinking about it and judging it, it's the thing we use most in our art making. And it's the least useful. So we've kind of got it flipped in general. And I'm speaking for myself, and I work with a lot of people, and I see this, we use our mind mostly to do things, and it's not the best. It's certainly not the best at generating amazing art, right? So when I have a workshop, what's so cool is that I can talk about this, just try to feel how you feel when you're making your work. And if you're feeling good, do more of that. And if it's feeling constrained and tight, you got to change it. And I can help you do that. And I can talk to a room of 50 people, and I can't be everywhere, but I can show up 20 minutes later and look over someone's shoulder, or they've raised their hand and they're like, this is not going good. This is not fun over here. Hey, help. And we get to look at the board, and then we can say, I can see it. You can see it in a second. There's an artifact of how you're feeling, and the brush strokes or the marks or the colors, or it feels muddy or whatever, gives you a clue as to how you were feeling when you did it, which is so great, because how can you remember? And how do you diagnose this? How can we get more embodied? How can we get something to feel more like how we want to feel if we have nothing to look at to tell when we're in the right state? Because when we're in the right state, when we're feeling more like ourselves, when we're not just in our head, when yes, we have intellect, but we're using our intuition, and there's a deeper sense, our soul, all of this, when there's some of all these things in it, that's our perfect state of being. And when we make art from that place, the art feels like that. And guess what? This is the business plan here. This is what makes killer, amazing art that other people will connect to. People will connect to art that makes them feel how you felt. Anyway, that's a longer marketing podcast episode, but it's really, really true that you need all three. And I would say the one that you need the least of is the thinking part. Let me just say a couple things around this. So the soul, the intuition is how, the soul is kind of like the voice of intuition. The way you access that, well, let me just say that the soul is the deeper sense, the deeper knowing you have. It's pretty much always right. It never lies. It doesn't have a lot of ego invested in it. It's the part of you that's incredibly wise. We all have it. Because it doesn't clamor around for attention. It's not like that at all. In fact, it won't bother you your whole life if you don't want to listen to it. It'll just sit there. It stays down there and just sits there. But it's the key to everything. It knows where you need to go. It already knows the amazing art you're going to make. It knows the answers. It has all that. And it's truthful. It doesn't ever lie. And sometimes we're not ready to hear it. And sometimes it's so quiet. There's so many distractions. There's so much going on, so much information that we never listen to it. And it's hard sometimes to hear it, especially if we're in our head all the time, right? We're always thinking, and thinking involves what we're seeing on Instagram and how, if someone bought that painting or how someone feels about us or all the things, just, oh my God, all the stuff that keeps you up at night. The way in to the soul part is through the body. The body is a great, stepping stone. And it's important to get there, if we feel in our head, to just go and dance and I do in workshops, right? Like turn on the music, take 5 minutes and just go for it and make your art. Just go crazy here. And it's in that non-thinking state. That's an easier way, an easier step to go to just let it go, let it rip. And then when you're in that state, you're better equipped to hear and feel and sense what it is that's important to you. So that's kind of an interesting a sort of checklist for this body, this the mind, the body, and the soul to sort of know that they're all needed, and the least important is the thinking. That gets you thinking about the proportions and gets you thinking about how to stop thinking, because that makes art so much easier to make. And it's the way to make amazing art. It's easier, than we are thinking. The last one here is around play, and that play is the way in. And I love this because this is so easy. We've all done this. We all can do this. Playing is simply doing whatever feels good, right? Think of kids on a playground. They're just making stuff up, they're just, okay, you be this, I'll be that. And we're in an imaginary plane and we're running around, whatever the things are, you're following what interests you, what lights you up. And this is the way in to making amazing art. It's the way in to making amazing life, literally. When you play, you discover the things that move you. That's how they come in. They don't come in through a tremendous amount of struggle and force. It's much, much easier than that. And incredible things happen when you're playing. And it reminds you how miraculous it can be. It's like, oh my God, and I know for those of you who are making art, have been making art, that some of the most incredible breakthroughs happen just doinking around. You're not even trying. It just comes through. It comes through. That's the soul. It comes through when the door's left open, when we're at ease, when we are more like ourselves. That's what we are when we're playing, when we're lighthearted. This is the best version of ourselves. This is what we're doing. This is the practice. This is how you get amazing art. You've got to get to be that. So I just love this, turning off that brain. You can't plan play. You don't need to. You already have that. Everybody has this. This is the way in, right? Part of this trip the whole trip actually was this commitment to play, that I am going to do something. I am not going to think. I'm just going to enjoy. I'm not going to plan it. We're going to figure this out as we go. Just see what will go the speed we want. We're just going to be together. It's going to be outside. All the things. If it's too hard, we'll slow down, whatever. And we're going to just have this amazing experience and just created space for it. And whatever can happen will be good, because if it's not good, we'll change it. And part of this trip was, we ended up going to these hot springs that were about 10 miles in. They're called Conundrum Hot Springs in Colorado, and it's about a 9-mile hike in, and they're at about 11,000 feet. And it's a pretty hard hike. And, it's one of those things you're not going to get out of your car and walk 9 miles and experience this place and then come back. You have to kind of stay there. So it's a commitment. And the weather was kind of rainy and stuff, but we went and got up there, and it was so beautiful. And these are thermal hot springs, beautiful, on the top of this mountain. And, we got there in the evening, and I remember thinking that this is so beautiful, and it's gets very cold at night, but this water, it's like a hot tub, and there was a few people there, and we got in, and the sun's going down, and there's no reason to get out because you're just so comfortable. You're like taking a bath at 11,000 feet, and it's all steamy, and then the stars come out, and it's such an interesting contrast because it's freezing cold. You've been hiking all day, and then you're in this like spa conditions, and we're having these amazing conversations. There was about 10 people there, and all of them had come from different directions and hiked many miles. I remember thinking that, how amazing to be and with these people. And it's like, well, who, are you going to even talk to these people? But everyone who had come there was so interesting. Most of them were kind of younger, like my kids' age, different people from different places. And there was a couple there, this guy, Rob, it was his 50th birthday, actually. And he had wanted to come to this place. He'd been like 15 years. He lived in Colorado. He'd always wanted to come. He never did. So they made this commitment, and he came for his 50th birthday, and he was sharing this. And, we were sitting, and it was stars and beautiful, just gorgeous. And we sang him happy birthday. And he was saying how this is the best birthday he's ever had, and that we were kind of like part of it, and how these people, no one was invited, but it kind of self-selected. And the point is that moment, that incredible incident, that I just sat there thinking, this is one of those moments that I'm able to walk here. I'm sharing this with my daughters who are grown. They're telling stories, and we're talking to all different ages of people, and this couple, and they're telling stories. And we stayed up till like midnight under the stars in this incredible place, and it was just, all these people came together. It was like the perfect dinner party. And I was thinking, how does this happen? You try and plan things with your friends, and people come and they're late and it doesn't work out, and how did this happen? How can this happen? Well, it happens because it self-selects. When you do things, like this was something we all wanted to do, and it was just, there wasn't like a reason for it. It was just centered around play and spaciousness, that's when amazing, miraculous things happen. And it was I know it all. I'll never forget it. It was just the most amazing evening. And so I think, in summary of these ideas, that probably the big artifact of an art making process, yes, you make art, and yes, and it's a practice of you becoming you, but ultimately I think it's gratitude. I think to remember that, wow, that we get a life where we get to do this, we get to experience, when we start living in this way of being an artist, to live, as Hannah described, artfully, to live to become and learn to be more present with ourselves and with others, and to connect and deeply need others, and all of that. There's just gratitude. And I'm just overflowing with that after this break. So I hope that some of what I've shared today, it resonates, and, this can propel you forward, or you think of something in a slightly different way. And I know because I listen to so many people talking about their experiences, that it's sometimes just a thing, one or two things. So I hope that there's a few things here for you. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. I was sharing with my daughter how cool this podcast project has been. As you know, we've passed 100, and I've got some really, it's just been a really, really great journey, and I appreciate you guys all being here. And, every Sunday I do I'm teaching on Sundays. I do like these little video vlogs that help people in their art. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that as well. Just go to art2life.com. You guys, thank you for being here. Okay, bye.